this day, October 10th, 1999, we're at Elim Lutheran Church meeting with Lena and Thilda Vangstad as they're going to give us history of the church, of the family, our ancestors, memories that they can recall. We're kind of getting organizing. We have Con, Lena and Thilda Vangstad.
I think that
Elton is here.
when we sit down,
Carl, Lois, and then myself running at the camera.
Or do you want us to, or do you want to use the pulpit, and do you want to get up and lecture?
Very likely.
Would you like a cup of coffee?
Yeah, I like a cup of coffee.
All right.
This is it.
I'll retire 3 times before it's all over.
Are you that old that you can retire twice?
Yes.
That must make him 120, doesn't it?
Just think, you're retired once.
Yeah. Well, you could really say I took early retirement from Land Lakes, but I'm also actually collecting a retirement from Multifoods too, so that's why I say I'm retired twice.
Now, how many years have you been retired?
Since 71, now that will make it 28, doesn't it?
Now, you're aware that most of your students are retired also?
Did what?
Many of your students are retired.
Oh, of course you'd say so. That's the thing that's sad about it.
You know, I was under three principals that had you as teacher. Kurt Granlund, Wayne Sedovic, and Tom Sandai.
Tom Sandai.
And Sandai is not retired, but the other 2 guys are. No, Sandai is still principal
Yes.
in someplace in the Minneapolis area.
Well, that's very easy.
But the rest of them are retired.
Sedgwick.
Yeah,
Where does he live?
in Fargo.
Fargo.
And Granlund lives in Colorado. Yeah.
Oh, those are nice fellows.
Yeah, weren't they though?
Oh, they were very fine fellows. They were. You got some good ones there.
Yeah, excellent.
And, the fellow was from. He was in Leonard for many years. Then he went to
Howard Murray?
Murray.
Howard Murray?
Yeah, where's he?
He's retired. He was my principal also.
Yeah.
So,
Say, where did you say he lives?
in Moorhead.
Oh, he lives in Moore.
Yeah.
And yet, the last Sunday we had a visitor from
No, they're here.
Boise, Idaho. It was my student, was Thilda's student. And then when she was principal of the college here.
Uh-huh.
Why don't you sit there, have a nice soft chair.
Isn't that fun?
But I could tell you so many things, nice things to say. He had a family of 4, I think 3 boys. And he said, I raised them just the way she did me. She said,
Well, Wayne Sedovic told me once that he borrowed a book from you
oh yes,
and lost it
oh,
and had to come back and tell you that this book was lost. And all you did was say, another great man also lost a book once. Referring to Lincoln.
well, that's a whole lot better than chew him up. I liked him. But it's fun to have him come back. One came back this summer, left a note, and he was saying, Dan O'Connor, and he's president of some kind of screw something company. Very, very, I know it's a plastic company of some kind, doing very well. He's a millionaire.
Oh, you taught him well.
Oh, yeah. Now, whom are you talking about? I'm talking about Tom Connor. Not Tom O'Connor. No, Dan O'Connor. We missed him. He just got.
Well, you know what?
Yeah,
You had said, back earlier this spring that you wouldn't mind sitting and visiting with us.
not a problem.
And that was a wonderful opportunity that we just could not let pass by.
Oh,
That time of offer doesn't come very often, and we're very honored that you would take time out of your day to just talk to us and tell us just what you remember.
and we're honored to think that you would want to come and hear it. We haven't, and we don't know very much.
Well, that's okay. But I just made a list of a few things.
Yeah.
We'll just start talking about some subjects, and then we'll just let the conversations run, and then when it seems like that's exhausted, I'll go to the next thing, and other people can chime in. What would be your earliest recollections of our the Fiskness family. I suppose it'd be Anders, Martin, or
It would
something
be
like that.
Anders. It would be Anderson. I didn't know what was her name?
Mine?
We didn't know them, her very well, but Anders, we knew him very well. Because he had arthritis for rheumatism so bad.
Okay.
We didn't know about them, we knew about Carl and Peter and Gina.
Con, I have a picture of Anders in that photo album.
Gina and Peter.
Well, I suppose they came first because they were in school with us, you know.
Yeah.
But then Anders Fiskness walked over to our place so many times. He and our father were such good friends. Because
Have they known each other from Norway, or?
well, I wonder if they,
I don't think they did very well. They knew all of them, but their phones were not there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because those hills.
It starts with mom, go about halfway through, and then you get to dad's side.
And they were in some other place.
Yeah.
They were in my visit with Gina, you know, so then we went down there and we stayed.
But,
Here we go, got more company.
and they-
Oh, yeah, here we go.
Hi.
Well, we're just starting to sit down and visit a little bit.
Oh, yeah?
Just getting started.
Hi, you two.
There's bunches of chairs.
Have you seen in church?
So
there's wasn't your back?
What is
There it
that?
is.
Probably was.
Carl? I even got some old pictures.
Yeah, we have to come here.
When they have the ladies identify them, I don't know who they are.
Oh,
We'll get another chair.
We were just kind of sitting down, and I was telling the Vangstad Twins that earlier this year they had graciously said that we ought to sit down and visit with the Fiskness family and tell us what they remember about our family, and boy, I took them up on it. So we're very honored that they are here and willing to spend part of their day just visiting with us. And as you folks walked in fact, they were just starting to talk about some of their early recollections. Here, they were saying that they know a little bit about, remember more about Anders and not so much about Carl. And I guess then I kind of let you go here and start. That's a picture of Carmen and Anders and Anna Sorley.
Wait, Anna, she said, would that be is that a child?
No, I think
Somebody
that's,
holding a child. Or what is that?
The child is Anna Sorley.
okay, the child is Anna Sorley.
Where did you get that picture from?
It's doubles taken. I just took pictures of all of dad's old pictures.
Okay, because I've seen that before somewhere.
I've never seen
I
that.
don't know if we got that in Guinness or not.
Okay, there's 3 adults and a child.
Well, the child is Anna Sorley.
I think
Right.
we-
And
So then I suppose that the adult would be Bertha?
I think we got.
Bertha Sorley. And Anna Sorley, if she had been
Can you tell
living,
us,
would have been about 87, 88 years old, I believe. Or 89. Can you imagine that? Of course, she's been dead about 30 years.
now they remember Anders? right?
Yeah, Anders.
What kind of personality? Tell us what these are.
Well, he was very friendly and very pleasant. And of course, he had arthritis, or was it rheumatism, we'd call in those days. And he'd walk from where the Forbread place is, you know, and then, well, that's his place, and he'd walk over to our place and spend the night. No, sometimes he'd spend the night at our place. Sometimes he'd walk from over to our place in the morning, late afternoon, he'd walk over to Ole Glucken. But Ole Glucken usually always took him back home in horse and buggy. But it took him, we would see him come, and we'd say, there comes Anders. And maybe 2 or 3 weeks later, no, hours later, he'd get
Where was he living then, on our home
He was living on the
place?
home place in Karen, where Cotton and
Yeah.
And he was very friendly, very easy to take, wasn't he? I mean, he was irritable. People loved to have him come. We always did. We kids always liked to have Anders come.
Yeah, I know you had mentioned one time that he'd come on the days when there was a Bible study.
Yes.
Apparently that was held at your parents'
Yes.
home, and then he'd come early.
Yeah.
Or was there
Obviously. Or
somebody
then
to take him home, and usually he was taken home by somebody, you know. Well, anyway, she'd walk back home, but he'd come usually down by all the Jake Olsons, for Jake Olsons used to live in a, lived in
No,
I don't know those.
that'd be.
Ed Mindrum's place?
Fritz, Fritz,
Oh, Fritz Didier, okay, yeah.
But,
Here comes Lauren and Kathy, so pull out another couple chairs.
oh, like Anders for Anders, Fiskness, don't worry. You talk so much, you said so many nice things about him. And she said, you didn't say very much about Colin, but my, what Colin was a good one. She was in
in
sugar.
public, so.
And she said, when she was sick, and Louise took care of her, she said she never complained. She was always, everything was just fine, no matter what. Good. And of course, they went to two different churches.
Yes, I was going to ask about that. My dad mentioned that briefly, but he didn't have a very good understanding of it. Is there any observations that you could share about
None
that?
that do. I never thought there was any.
I don't think there was any
And we
explanation.
never talked about that.
Never.
But-
They never, I was never here and talk.
I never did even.
But Anders came to Elim here, and Colin stayed at Sauk Valley.
Yeah, yeah.
My dad stated it was very painful for him as a young boy to see his grandmother go one way and his grandfather go the other way. They would walk together to church, but at Sauk Valley they would split. Were you aware of any of the pain with any of the Fiskness kids in regards to that?
There were many families that were divided like that too, because now like Gilbert Olson, couldn't get in.
No, no, Gilbert and Marie were all right. So you don't need that one. But how about Garrett Sampson's grandmother? Was Hannah. Hannah was the mother, and she would be the grandmother of Gerhard. And his grandfather, I used to get one I'm sure, his mother was Merit Gilseth. She went to Salem,
Okay.
and Peter Gilseth went with her 2 or 3.
No, that Peter Gilseth, was that the Peter Gilseth that sponsored my grandparents and that lived on the, what used to be John Raiklin's farm and is now Elim Gilson?
Yeah, that's the one.
Were there 2 Peter Gilseths?
Yeah, they're 2 little parents who were bad.
Yeah. Did they both live around
But they were
here?
not brothers, were they?
No,
I don't think so.
I don't know if they were blood relations at all.
I don't think
so.
Came from the same farm. you
Oh,
know.
I had heard that one was dying when the other was born, and so then they named the one that was being born Peter so that there would be a Peter Gilseth.
I never heard discussions of that one too.
But I didn't know that little Peter. Well, just got full of parents about to give here.
Okay, sword bearer. Well, back to Anders then. I forget when he died.
1917.
1917. Okay, so you were teenagers then, and preteens. If he died in 1917.
One died in 17 and one grandparent died in 22, and I don't remember which is.
Karen Cotton lived later than he did.
Okay.
Okay. And they were older people then. They were in their 80s. Then it's,
17, you would be 16 then, you know.
yeah, right. So you were teenagers. And so then you were already living in town going to school in the wintertime, I suppose, huh?
No, we didn't live, well, that was by that time, yes.
Yeah. Any other thoughts about, that you remember about Anders and Carden or the family?
I know that Anders was a hard-working man. And that even when he could hardly move, he was out doing something. And he did help grubbing, you know, all those awful stumps. He and our father did that together.
Of all the relatives since him, who would most look like him or be most like him?
Did I?
Of all the nephews and nieces, you know, not nieces, but the nephews, who would most look like Anders? Is there any one of us?
Was he tall, short,
He
thin?
was short.
Short.
He was short, wasn't he? But I would say that Martin Fiskness about the size of Carl, wasn't he?
Yeah, probably.
Carl and Martin.
Martin Fiskness was big, hands, big hands.
Yeah, he wasn't
very
tall.
person, but he wasn't real tall.
Don't think so.
You know, I
Carl,
lived with, Grandpa, I lived with Grandpa until I was 18 years old.
But that's interesting that you say that he had a lot of arthritis or rheumatism. And I remember Grandpa Martin Fiskness seeing his footprints in the snow, and as he was older, his steps were deformed in the feet. I'd walk along behind trying to figure out how on earth he could make his toes turn out like that, because it was almost like this.
Yeah,
Remember that?
Is that Mark Fiskness?
I remember his hands, how very big his hands were.
And
That's some work too, but.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was.
Splitting wood. He split wood for days on end.
But-
6-8 hours a day, he'd split wood.
the sore joints or whatever, I think might be a Fiskness characteristic, because many years ago, when Lois was younger, she was sitting at a restaurant talking to Dad, and he kind of got talking about what it would be like when he got old. And he says, I think I'll be just like my father and my grandfather. He says, I'll live to be old, but my joints will be so sore and tight, he says, that I won't hardly be able to move. He says, I'll just kind of stiffen up. I guess that was the word he used. He says, I'll just stiffen up. Oh, a little bit.
Do you share any of that joint problem, Lester?
Yeah, that's pretty common.
Yeah, I think
I got that one.
so. Anyhow, that's anybody else have any questions you'd like to? We kind of got a list of several subjects that we're going to kind of guide the conversation into, and we were starting out with some of their earliest recollections. Anybody? So we're starting out obviously with Anders and Karen, and any other thoughts?
I can't remember going over to see Gina at home.
Oh, okay.
We always met at school, played in school all the time. And as we grew older, she always came to our place. There were more of us here. You see, we were more in our family. And so Carl and Peter, we saw a lot of those three kids.
And you skated.
Yeah,
Oh,
they
you
skated.
talked about your ice
Skating.
skating.
Yeah.
On 4-weeks not
On
late.
4 weeks not late. Dad skated with my daughter Lori and myself. Man, he must have been way into his 70s. Yeah, your mother was just petrified. Remember that, Lori, when we got Dad over at the lake and tried to get him to see, he tried to skate a little bit. We had some old skates that wouldn't stay on. I remember that. He was way into his 70s.
Now, while you were talking about Gina, Gina would have been about a classmate or close to it, 1 year ahead of you, probably in country school.
She's 2 years ahead.
But you graduated from high school together.
She's here. But we got mixed up in there somewhere.
We were in high school in 3 years.
Oh, you went through high school in 3, okay.
The ladies.
And no, she,
We graduated the same year.
yeah, right. And I've always tried to figure out how that happened, that you and Gina were in the same class when I suspected you started a year apart, because she was a year older.
No, we started school. But
She was ahead of us in country school.
Yeah.
But we got ahead because Elvin Mallon and Raymond Ritter were in the 6th grade, and we were in the 4th grade or somewhere along that. But Hilda Case, a very bright girl, and who else came along? So we were 4, somewhere along the line. They skipped. We were skipped the 5th grade, didn't we? That's where we got it.
They used to do that in country school
Yeah.
also.
Yeah. There's too many classes here.
Yeah,
so
we
we
know
go
it, and
together.
if they had some kids that could be consolidated.
Sometimes I think it was all right.
If you could read, that's about all you needed to do.
When you attended high school at Osakis, which family did you stay with, or did you?
We stayed with some, we did light housekeeping. We had a room and a clothes closet that we cooked in. We didn't need any clothes closet. And we wore that. And that was at Brisbane's, and that's the house that across from the Methodist Church. That's where we stayed.
Yeah.
Went to Ringo.
And then Gina stayed with Board Anderson.
No, she stayed with Eric Nelson.
Alec Nielsen, that's right. Yeah,
We stayed at Board Anderson.
You
too.
okay.
We stayed at Brisbane first year, and then we stayed at Board Anderson.
But she stayed at Eric Nielsen.
Yeah.
I remember Dad saying that.
I remember Gina always must have gotten 3 new outfits every spring and every fall. Her mother must have been quite determined she was going to look like everybody, nicer than anybody else. Didn't she? She always had 3 of them. I think it may have been 5. It seemed so many to us. Maybe it was only 1 or 2. But she was always well dressed.
When
Well,
someone
Gina
was
was after him. She had plenty of
Did her mother sew them, or?
No, her mother couldn't sew a stitch.
Oh.
I don't think she could even mend.
Oh.
But I can't remember if the boys were ever wore mended, very like they did. But she couldn't sew, but she hired that.
Oh, interesting. Now, if Gina was close in age to you, when you went to country school, I suppose you pretty much walked by the Fiskness place then, or did you go cross country?
No, go ahead.
We cut across the Jake Olson land.
Oh, okay, through there.
Here land, cut across.
Okay.
There's that Sauk Center Road, you know. That was, you remember that one? That was between, that was a road between the,
That's Sauk Center Road, you mean?
yeah, Sauk Center. It started up there on the hill where we,
Olson, Axel Olson land, Jake Olson's land.
Yeah?
it went south.
Yeah, well, actually, that used to be, we used to see that in the fence line.
That was used to
Oh,
be
yeah,
the
yeah,
the
right on
road.
the fence line, it
Oh,
went straight.
okay, so there was a road there.
Oh, yeah, there was a road there.
I didn't know that.
Very good one.
That's where Dad found some empty moonshine jugs one time.
Oh,
Bushes.
Where was
I'm
that?
telling you about it.
They were hid in a bush along that
I
road.
remember this,
Yeah.
And you see there's some
Between Jake Olson's.
Good $5 red wing pottery jugs.
I remember that, Dad telling about that.
yeah, that road came up on the hill behind it where the schoolhouse stands now, right? And because there's remains of an old road there, so I suppose that just went on up to the north, then,
And hit that, that road with Sauk Valley.
okay.
Town line road.
Town line road, okay, that was town line.
And that's a road that we've been,
Oh, okay.
never walked by. The other
When did that road get eliminated?
It must have been about 30 years,
In
somewhere in
the
the 20s.
30s.
No, 20s maybe.
20s.
Well, whenever they laid out the township roads, they must have eliminated that.
Am I correct, that's where the road was part of that old bridge that used to be about a quarter of a mile or eighth of a mile south of the township road? There was an old bridge there in Shorty.
Yeah, you mean it, yeah, that's the one, that's the road went across
Yeah.
it. Yeah.
Oh,
Went
okay.
down at an angle
Yeah.
down through there. That's the groove you still see in the hill.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting.
We used to play when we were in country school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See who would fall in.
Sometimes we dammed up the river and sometimes we opened it up.
Sometimes you get a hole.
You remember that road? Sure.
Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if he used to don't have a sort of a cart road down.
Yeah, yeah, they road.
On
Yeah.
Henry's land now, it's still a groove in the hill.
Okay. Oh, then, okay. That would have been nice if that had been there when I was going to school. You
Yes.
go all the way over to the corner north of the Fiskness place there and then come down. It was 2 miles cross country. It was
Well,
miles
somebody
more.
had some clout there and wanted that closed evidently, whether it was
Here's that.
Jake Olson
Uh,
or whatever, but they closed that out.
Jake Olson put it.
Yeah, that's what
They
I
loved it
figured.
very much.
That's
And,
what I figured.
They get, and I don't think them more than years objected to it, as long
No.
as they got a road straight from their house down to the hill.
Absolutely, that's what they want.
Otherwise, it's a curve.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see, otherwise they had to end up going halfway skiddy corner down through the river and across
That's
that
right.
bridge. So when they laid up the township roads there, they spurred it.
When you were in country school, there was quite a few kids, right? Pretty good sized number of students. And Dad talks about there being around 40. And you started out in the old school, which he says was a lot smaller than the one that's there now.
Oh, yes.
Well, the building was so small, you know, that maybe if we did a better building, there wouldn't have been so many kids.
I know that the cars had, there was had 3 in the city.
Yeah.
And the cars had between Anna, our sister Anna and Gina were very good friends all the way through school. You see, Anna went out, got other work, and so then we picked up Gina. But Carl sat between Anna and Gina, and he never liked that, this way. So he pinched them, and I remember he was punished for that too,
Oh.
because the teacher saw him, and so he slapped Gina. Carl slapped her like that. Oh, that's bad. So then she made him stand up in front, and he sat, stand there. And that's the punishment. Do you remember that? He sat just all afternoon this way. He quit. Teacher Cohen quit.
Where did Danny sit?
Yeah,
Peter sit.
No, he was out in the back seat. I don't think they ever put, but it's Petey and Paula Ritter, they're twins. And they were the same grade as Peter. And Arthur, our brother, was a year older than Peter, I think. Well, there too, but he was in that age group.
But
And
Dad
I don't
was
think they ever had
Dad
it. They
Was
didn't
Dad-
have,
did
no,
he
we were the
really
ones.
good?
Thilda and I had Willie Schwartz between us. The little kids had to sit between us, that's the funny part.
Yeah, a little one, well, I suppose that was, Dad said there was not enough room for everybody to sit in the double desk, so they put a little kid in between two of the larger ones.
Oh.
So I remember him talking about that, sitting between Anna Sorley and I forgot that it was Dina that he
Yes.
sat between.
Oh, yeah.
That wouldn't be good, putting a brother next to his sister.
Just think of being a teacher. Oh my.
Was Peter a well-behaved student?
Yes, Peter was very well behaved. Peter was,
That's what he always told us.
he was a bright boy. Arthur and he, I don't know which one was the best one in math, but they couldn't stump, the teacher never could stump those two.
And not in spelling either, right?
And spelling. I remember, what grade was I in? What were, like, third, fourth, fifth grade, and Peter was monitoring us, the younger ones. And he marked on the blackboard, and I was supposed to write, remember. See, I remember all this. And then I had REMBER. And he crossed that out like that. I got mad at him. And I said, that's right. And he said, no, it isn't, you're wrong. Well, I said, yes. Then he finally took his paper and showed me. I was mad at Peter yet, but I had to admit he was right. But for a long time, I wouldn't talk to Peter.
You know, I have all Dad's report cards from grade 1 to grade 8, and they're just, everything's A.
Yeah, he's good.
Yeah,
Dino's very bright too.
and I don't have.
I have her report
I have
cards.
Dad's.
Yeah, I know Dad said that Dina was a good student.
Yeah.
And he talked about who was, she was valedictorian of her class, and he told me who it was that was the salutatorian.
Francis, Arlene,
Salisbury.
Salisbury.
What's her name?
Annie Salisbury.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
That name doesn't ring a bell with me, but I know he said that there
That's
was
a high school class.
a lot of competition there between Ina and that other person.
1919, yeah.
Class of 1919.
I wonder what happened to the old school building. Did they tear that down, or did that get moved away a little bit?
I don't know where that went, the old school building went.
Seems to me that got moved.
Three?
Yeah?
It moved, I know it's
Where didn't it move somewhere?
moved somewhere.
Oh,
It seems to have Peter's.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Is that the one that went,
Truck that away.
did Peter get it? No, I don't know either, I don't know what happened.
You don't suppose it was the house for Al Lee or?
I think it went to Al Didier's place.
Yeah, I think
That's where it
now
went.
that you say
Yeah,
that.
I just think it got moved, that's what I remember.
I think you're right.
It was Al Didier's. Dad told me
Al
that.
Didier's.
That's what I seem to.
And they changed it into a house?
Yeah, it wouldn't be.
It was so tiny, that was an awful tiny house.
Because Nick Didier got married about that time, see.
Okay, see, that's probably what
I
happened.
think that's where it spent the last years.
Well, let's see, you went to that, the old school, the small one, you would have been about halfway through. I think Dad said he went into that, was in that first building about 2 or 3 years.
Yes, and we were there.
1 year.
1 year is all Dad was
No,
there?
more than that. No, you see, we went 1 year, and then we moved there. Were we about 5th grade, 6th grade?
When you moved into the new building?
Who's the teacher?
Oh, man.
Amanda Crocier, Mrs. Flint. Mrs. Flint, we were 6th graders.
Okay.
Mrs. was a first in the new school, yeah.
Who were some of your country school teachers?
Anna Stronger
Yeah, I remember Dad talking about her.
and Beatrice Kenny.
Yeah, oh yeah, I've heard that name a lot.
Because we were at the state school, so we moved down there, but before that, didn't Bertina Nelson teach that? Well, we went there then, was it?
And was there a Larson, Martha
I don't know, must be
Martha Nielsen?
Martha Olson Larson.
Yes.
That's Phil Larson's
Yes.
mother.
That was Louis.
Louis Larson's wife.
My grandmother.
Yeah,
Yes,
and
your grandmother.
she was excellent. And Amanda Crocius, she was Peter Nelson's daughter. She was another excellent teacher. And then Mrs. Flint was head of that, 6, 7, 8. And we were fortunate with all those three, and they were absolutely good first country teachers. Beautiful.
Now, one of the school teachers there, Dad said, went sliding on the hill.
That was Mrs. Louis Larson.
No, that's what I thought, and ran into a tree
Yeah.
and broke both legs.
Oh,
No, but
Oh, one leg, okay. Well, I know both leg, or leg or
And
leg.
she stayed with the Fiskness is why she recuperated.
That's right.
Oh.
Yeah, that's right. I'd forgotten. Dad said that.
how long was she gone? She came back teaching, and she stayed with Martin and Greta Fiskness.
Okay.
They took good care of her. Can you imagine that? They took her to school every morning. I suppose Peter did that. Because he would be the one that...
Would the Martin Fiskness family have been considered poor, average, well-to-do, if you put it in monetary terms?
Good. Wouldn't you put the Martin Fiskness family in the category of conservative, but well preserved, well healed?
Well, here.
Because they weren't they considered?
Yeah, yeah, just like us.
No, we were a little a step behind them. More kids.
Yeah, well, it'd be a lot of kids. It costs money, even then, I'm sure, to raise
They
kids.
got their farm paid off before ours did.
How
You're
did you,
thinking, you're thinking of economic.
Yeah.
But you're still thinking about brains.
Brains, oh.
How did you pronounce my grandmother's name, Martin's wife?
Greta.
Greta.
In Norwegian, Greta.
How about in English? Or
Greta.
just
Greta.
I just heard you say that.
But
I
then
never
Martin,
know how to pronounce that.
but Martin Fiskness was married to
Greta Fiskness.
Greta, and she was a different kind of Norwegian
Oh,
again.
yeah?
So they didn't.
Well, she would be the same kind as we are. She would be the same Nikolai Peterson that we are.
How do you mean different Norwegian? What does that?
No, we didn't speak the same
Oh,
dialect.
The same dialect. Came from a different part of Norway.
Yeah.
When the bank closed in West Union, didn't Martin lose some money?
Yes, we have Ralph did a tape of my dad, and Martin, Peter, and Carl all lost money in the bank failure, and it totaled about $1,000 for the three of them.
And that's quite a bit, you know.
Now, in those days, that was a lot of money.
Quite a bit.
Dad, I think, lost 300, and was it?
He basically said that each of them lost 300.
Each of them lost about 300.
And they recovered about 20-30%.
Yeah, recovered 20-30%. But Dad talked about that in 1985. We just watched that tape here a little bit ago.
When the Osakis banks failed, then Evelyn Oswald's father lost money. And when they settled this, he got one penny or 2 pennies now.
Oh,
And the check, and I remember Arthur and Louis had that check. And they were good friends of Margaret, our sister Margaret and Esther, they were good friends. And one Christmas, was it Arthur that gave Margaret that check? He got it back again. But that's, I think it's 1 or 2
that would be
cents.
A.G. Anderson.
A.G.
Andrew G. Anderson.
I said, he recovered.
You were talking about Greta or
Fiskness.
Fiskness. You should share with the people here, because you told me one time that you Fiskness kids ought to know that when there was a family, when the Elim had their prayer meetings in the homes, that Greta Fiskness always would pray for the family,
You remember
and
that?
the way she did it.
You tell it.
Go on.
She's had trouble with it. But there used to be great prayer meetings in the homes. And that's what we think is so. Just not long ago we talked about this. That we'd have a practice for the prayer meetings would be at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. How many came? Many, many, many people. Not many women, but more men came. you can see them come in, and when it was a dark place, where they would come in. They would also have them in the evening. It was Wednesday. And this one time we can remember that Greta Fiskness, we've been praying, and she finally got up and got on her knees. And of course the whole thing, very seldom people did that, but she got on her knees and prayed. She cried and prayed, and she prayed for her family. And it was emotional. It gave you, and anyway, it had an influence on anybody, everybody. But it was the fact that she was so sincere and so broken up over things. They evidently worried about circumstances of some kind. But it was for their family that they would all be saved. And I think you people were included too. So, and another thing that about her is that, and I don't know what time this was when Reverend Buckney was here. He came in 1912, so it must have been about 14, 15, 16, somewhere in there. And you probably knew that, I've heard this story before. Greta Fiskness became very ill. She had, now what was her problem?
She died of pneumonia.
Yeah, no, but this
But
is before
this
that.
would have been before that.
Yes, it's before that.
I never heard
And
that.
then Reverend Buckney was always believed in prayer and healing. And he always preached it too. Of course, we weren't aware of it, but we've heard about that since. And then Mrs. Martin Fiskness was sick. Then we can remember that one day we saw Ole Tuken walk by our place. And evidently Reverend Buckney had driven over there. And I don't know who was the other elder, or the other two elders were, but they met and prayed for Greta Fiskness, as she became well. And that is about the same time that Andor Forbrink died. Wow. So if you remember what the year that was,
Okay.
that's the year what we remember.
But I can tell you, my mother lived with her for just a short while before, and my mom had nothing but good things to say about her.
Yeah,
How
it wouldn't,
kind.
no, she was good. She was a very good woman, strong character.
My mother said she'd give her everything.
Uh-huh.
She'd go around the house, and if there was something, she'd just give it to her, she said.
Uh-huh. But,
And that was Greta.
but then she thought very much of Annie too. She was very.
And then I was to be named after her.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
And what is your name then, Gladys?
Yeah. They had all kinds of names spit out for me, like Gertrude.
But this is, I think they have to tell you that story about when we wrote to Peter. Shall I?
Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, you wrote
This-
that?
This is,
Yeah.
and this we know for a fact now because we saved letters from each other. Thilda taught in the little town of Gackle. I taught in the little town of Hannah. Then the next year we both taught together at Langdon. But it's when we were separated, right? Then we were at, we liked Peter, but Peter should have a nice wife. And so we said, so Thilda wrote to, she said, Dad, she wrote to Peter. Peter, I usually wrote to me. And then I said Peter's to Thilda. And Thilda wrote to Peter too, but I wrote more often to him, but it's kind of fun. And then so Thilda wrote to, what is this, Peter? What is this I hear about you? I hear that you are stepping out with Dan Eric's sister. And she said, is that true? And then he wrote back and said, well, that's news to him. He didn't know a thing about it. Then next fall, Thilda and I talked together. And then one day I came home from, when I went down to get the mail, and here was a letter from Peter. And I read the letter, and first, and then I said to them, when I came home, I said, we got a letter from Peter, and listen, you better sit down. And in that letter, he said, I won't be writing to you anymore, because I have now, all my letters will now go to my fiancée, Annie Erickson. And I don't think it's, I'm not saying it verbatim now, but I don't think it's right for me to correspond with you, having Annie. And he said, and I wrote the letter back and I said, congratulations, Peter. But that doesn't make any difference whether you marry Annie or not. You'll get letters from us. Whether you want them or not. And I tell you, that's about 5 years ago. We kept our letters. When we were through, when we came together in the spring, I gave my letters to her. I got my letters back. And you know, it came a time when we began disposing of things. And so here was that diary that I had in those letters. So I said to Thilda, I bet we'll find something about that Peter and Annie deal. And you know we did. And,
You did?
Yes, we did. Found the letter that we corresponded, and Peter's letter.
Oh,
So
That's
we should,
something.
well, we should have saved it. So
Dad was a great letter writer. When I was away at school nursing, he would write 6 and 7 pages.
oh yes, he wrote about everything.
yeah, he was a good one.
Yeah, and we wrote to Carl too. Carl wasn't that good writer. But he liked our letters too when he was out west working in the harvest fields.
And Dad always started his letter off with, I take my pen in hand.
Is that right? Oh yes, I can remember another thing that fits in here. That is it when at those prayer meetings, you see, we were young growing up with that, and we learned that the men, mostly men in the church, had certain ways of approaching God, the way they said. And Alfred Johnson was an itinerant fellow that worked around here. You don't remember him there. No, he's been dead long. And whenever he started his prayer, he always said, Tuk Chatagud. Tuk Chatagud. And he always started that. So we knew, so we knew that way. And do you know what Martin Fiskness always said? Talk or love or praise. Now, thanks and love is praise. But love, what does that, I don't know how they translate it in English. But talk, respect. Yeah, no, yeah.
Well, that'd be Norwegian, you'd
Yeah.
find it together.
Yeah, talk or love, praise.
L-O-V,
You find it very,
love?
yeah.
L-
Well, you'll find it, I would think you'd find it like, praise the Lord and so on.
Yeah. But he always starts.
Or honor and praise?
Honor and praise, good
Praise, praise.
But it fits in very nicely in the Norwegian,
Takkalava praise.
Takkalava praise.
Okay.
And Martin, Ole Klugen, he had various ways, but he prayed so long. His prayers lasted for 15 minutes.
You will remember
We timed it.
John Cookins used to last for half an hour.
John Cook.
We did, I know we always just said, John took after his father.
Oh, yeah. It was on the length of the prayer. We remember that.
Well, I suppose some of these things carry on. One of the things I remember of Peter, and he was the one who was in charge of the Mission Society when I was a kid.
Oh, sure.
And I suppose that, was there a Mission Society service that we didn't sing from Greenland's Icy Mountains? Number 393? 393.
And I wanted to sing that at his funeral and I was outvoted.
Oh. From Greenland's Icy Mountains.
Oh.
From Greenland's icy mountains to India's coral strand.
That was
Grandpa used to have that saying.
Dad, Peter, yeah,
that must-
sang that every mission
That
Sunday.
had to be Peter's favorite song.
Yeah.
And then when he served communion, Peter always had the same Bible verse. Anyone recall that?
May he who has begun the good work in you fulfill it until the day of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was his first.
Yeah. And that was always different than what the pastor used.
Yeah, but Dad
Here's
never
all.
failed to use that verse.
That's right, that was Peter's.
Didn't make any
That
difference
was
what the
his
rest were
signature.
using, that was what Dad would use.
Do you kids remember when Dad used to be the auctioneer at the Ladies' Aid?
Yeah, I have a recollection
You
of that.
remember that, Selena? Well, he loved that, didn't he? Up there rattling off all the...
Are you talking about that fall, kind of that harvest?
Kind of a harvest
They
thing.
had it right up here in the front of Elim, they
And they
laid the stuff out across the front.
Brought all their embroidery. I know
Right,
Mother
right.
would embroider for months and put her embroidery up there in aprons. You remember that?
That's right, Peter was the auctioneer for
Dad
that.
was
Now
the
that you say that,
auctioneer.
I remember a couple of those.
He really rattled it off, you know?
We weren't very big when they stopped.
No.
No, they stopped that, but I used to like that.
Oh,
Was
that
great.
was
That was fun up there. Little dolls, I mean, little dolls out of stockings.
Of course, when we were there, didn't we? Sheets and pillowcases.
Mommy used to embroider pillowcases all the time.
And dish towels even,
And
embroidered dish
towels.
towels.
Your mother did too.
Yes, oh yeah.
Mhm.
Well, that's, any other questions about the school days oh, I was gonna ask you something. Dad, in that interview that he did, talked about one year that their family had scarlet fever and they were quarantined for most of the winter. And I was wondering if that might have been a year that Gina might have dropped back a year in school. But maybe that,
That was ahead of us.
But she,
On a
I don't think she dropped out. It was just that we were accelerated.
oh, okay, you moved up and,
We were about the
yeah, that happened lots of
Yeah,
times for
yeah,
people in
that's-
those. There was another question I was gonna ask. I'll move on.
Could, I was gonna,
Yeah.
did you go to normal school for a year and then
Yeah.
teach country school?
Yeah, Gina we
Gina did too.
all
Okay.
together
Where did you do your normal schooling at?
At the Osakis.
Well, they had a normal school.
Yeah,
outside.
yeah, right in
It's
there.
just one room
We
and then
started
one
there.
teacher.
And you taught in some country schools around here, I
Yeah,
believe?
for 2 weeks. Where
Where
did
the
Gina
country
go?
school
I
too
don't
long.
remember.
I don't know.
I went to District 53, that's still standing along Highway 10. That's where I taught.
And didn't one of you teach down at the District 3 for a little bit, or am I imagining that?
3,
Yes.
a little bit, I thought they're 5 years.
5 years?
I taught,
What years were you at District 3?
but yeah, I taught, must have been 1920, 22. Well, then I taught 2 years down there, and then I went over to District 92 and taught 3 years, and I went back to District 3 and went back to 92.
No, you had Al Didi in your class.
Absolutely, he was my first grader.
Your first grader.
And that's why he always, because he was the only first grader they had there. And he sat in my lap and read. And he was 5, and he was a cuddly fellow, you know. So that's why we,
Did one of you teach at 63 also, or am I imagining
Yeah.
that? Yes.
And then one was at
63.
17.
For 3 years, didn't I?
yes,
6 years.
Now, did you do that before you went to the university?
oh yes.
Well, we didn't go to university. We went to university only in summer.
Okay.
We couldn't afford to
Yeah,
take a year
okay.
off, you know.
But then we went to, then we took our junior college at Bella City. And then we went down to university for our
okay.
degree.
Okay. Question about the District 3. When you first started, obviously, a lot of the kids, and I think Dad said that he didn't really know any English until he got to school. You didn't either, probably. So you had a lot of kids there that spoke only Norwegian, and I suppose then the German kids down there, did they speak German?
But I tell you, I think in District 3, we didn't have that problem so much as in 63 and 17. Because when we got to District, we had 1 year, I can't remember that we spoke Norwegian at all in District 3 then.
I never had. Not in District 3,
In District 3,
it's only one language.
there's English.
Didn't
And there
have-
were- but before that had been German because of radio kids and so on.
Yeah, the Germans had trouble, I guess, earlier.
I know Dad said one year that there was, you had Norwegian kids that spoke only Norwegian, and there were German kids that spoke German, and the teacher didn't know either German or Norwegian.
I could
so-
imagine that because
Oh, yeah, that
before
could
we moved down
possibly.
there.
No, you say you moved down there. When did that happen?
That we were second graders. When we
Where
came
were you
down.
before?
District 6, we were in 63.
63.
Oh, where did you live then?
We lived, it's a
Right
vacant,
across the road from the Salem Church.
Oh, you did? I didn't know that.
there's a hawk, we lived there. Our dad rented
Kitty
there.
corner, but there are no buildings there. We didn't take them with us, but I guess they, no.
Okay, so then you moved down to the
Place where we
the
lived.
Red Place there, as you referred to it in later
But you
years.
see, we had lived down there at the Red Place before. We'd lived on the 40 acres in the corner, went over, you turn by the Fiskness
Yes.
now.
But that's gone.
That's-
And then we moved to the hill, on the hill, you know, and
Right,
where
okay.
the Nashes lived. That's where we lived all the time.
Okay. Okay.
Until
And the hill,
How long did you live at that place across from Salem?
3 years, because Dad rented that farm for 3 years.
Well, across from Salem, was that to the east then?
no, it's
There's
just-
nothing left there.
Where the graveyard is,
Yeah,
yeah, right across from the
right
graveyard.
there.
No buildings there now.
It would have been Elim
Yeah,
Johnson.
but Andrew still got that.
Yes.
Then Leaf bought it eventually.
Haugers lived there?
Ivan rented it.
That's Harvard's lived there.
Hauger, yes. When I was a kid, Harvey Hauger. That was the place.
That house is still probably surviving, because Andrew bought that house from Ivan Johnson. It's tall and skinny,
Yeah.
Was it?
and that's still standing, I would guess.
Andrew's Grove.
It is, yeah.
Where's that? That Hogger place.
Yeah, the house is over in Andrew's Grove.
So the house you lived in?
Yeah, it is.
That's right.
I think so, unless it fall down, I think
It's
that's.
still in pretty good.
See, even you learned something today.
We learned a lot. I thought I had absorbed everything.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Anybody else got any thoughts or questions, observations about the family or the school days? And otherwise, we'll move on kind of to a little
Would
bit.
there have been any one tragedy in the Martin Fiskness family that would stand out? You mentioned that Greta had been sick, but was there any other tragedies or?
No. Regret I recovered.
Do you know exactly what was wrong with Aunt Lena when she was, Aunt Lena was, my mother told me, but I didn't, Aunt Lena was very, very ill and lost all her hair.
That was erysipelas.
Oh, she had erysipelas?
Is that what the?
Yeah, I think that's what they call it.
She was, that's what she was in normal training.
In,
No,
in nurses training. And
And I can
apparently she
remember.
was very, very ill. Mother said they thought she might not live.
Yes, because I tell you, here's another story too about that. I can remember that we kept track of course, how things were. And Mrs. Eric Nelson would be a sister of Mrs. Greta Fiskness. And they talked to each other every day about what was going on. And if you heard the ring to Fisknesses, you listened in.
Sure.
It cut your line, you know.
That went on forever.
And so we always kept in
Yeah.
touch that way.
Yeah.
And then Mrs. she told she and Mrs. What's her name? Birgitta were talking. And then Birgitta said to her, "Don't worry," she said. And your mother said, I can't help but ver just the same. She tried, they tried English, you see, but they use it Norwegian.
Yeah.
I said, I can't. But she said, how did she say it? She talked Norwegian. She talked Norwegian. I can't hjälpa. Well, hey, yeah, just saying. I can't hjälpa ver. So much or something. But anyway, so that's where we kept.
Kept track. Yeah, because
She was very sick.
I remember Mother telling me about that she was very, very sick.
And Greta had long, very thick, heavy hair. Like your, but had a light brown, was it? A light brown. And Gina had that too as she was growing up. Hers grew darker, but she had a lot of hair too. And we had thin hair. We were thin haired.
Did Gina ever have a romance with anyone? Ever come close to getting married or?
Not that we know of. She had, I think, some very, very good men friends. Can't remember. I remember when she was in the Meiji that she talked about somebody.
Is that right?
A man. Very, very. And then
I have a letter, 2 letters, written by Greta to Gina. And one of them is written December 4th, 1931.
oh yeah.
And it's written to Gina, Min snilla chada Gina. And both of them are, the greeting is Min snilla chada Gina. My, I guess snilla would be my well-behaved, if a child is being well-behaved and is not creating a problem, I remember my folks talking about this, and snilla, a good or whatever. Anyhow, in that letter, it's written in Norwegian to Gina in Pipestone, and Greta is talking about that she'd been to the doctor, and she was so happy because the doctor told her she did not have, and I did not know that word, but I asked my mother to translate it, and she said it translated to consumption or TB. And so Greta was feeling so good that she did not have tuberculosis. And on the 6th, 2 days later, she died of pneumonia.
Exactly, that's right. Well, those are related.
Well, they're lung diseases. Of course, in 1931,
Probably a misdiagnosis is what it was.
you know, in 1931, they did not have the medical, you know, the antibiotics. Dad said that she had this terrible sore throat. And so she asked him, and he got in his car. He had a Model T, I suppose. And so he went into West Union or Osakis, whichever one, and got ice cream. That's the only thing that kind of soothed her throat. And that was within 24 hours of when she died.
It was very sad, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because I can remember again the telephone. Our mother wasn't feeling very well, and our sister Marie from Alexandria was there checking on her. And then in the afternoon, there was a telephone call that went through somewhere, and she heard, and we listened in, and here someone told that Greta Fiskness had just passed away. And here comes Carl Fiskness. This is the same day. Carl Fiskness was out. Now he'd been somewhere cutting wood, and he came through, and he stopped at our place and visited. And Marie wanted to say to him, "Carl, go home. You shouldn't stay here and visit." But they didn't tell him, thank goodness, when he came home.
Wow.
Oh, he didn't know.
He didn't know, you see, because it was very sudden. Everything was so sudden. Because they talked about it, and the mother was not at all well, but not dangerously, I didn't think.
Your mother mentioned how very close Gina was to her mother.
Right.
Yes, very, very, very good, very good.
And my mom was, we were just talking about that. Mom was a little bit pregnant, 3 months, and she didn't want anybody, to really know, because she didn't know, how it was going to go, and etc. So she mentioned to me in this, and she was so sorry that she hadn't told Greta that she was going to have a little baby.
And then she died and you were born 6 months later?
Yeah.
Yep.
And my mother just loved her. She talked so highly of Greta so many times.
I think everybody.
How
Greta
good
Fiskness
she
very
was
popular.
to her.
She was the first president of the Ladies
Was she?
Mission Society, I think.
Well, we got a letter that Gina wrote, or Greta wrote to Gina, one or the other, just a day or two before she died.
Yeah, that's the one I'm referring
Yeah,
to.
that's it,
Yeah, that's written in Norwegian.
yeah.
That's the one where she said that she was glad that she didn't have
Where was Dina then?
Pipestone.
I remember going to catch the bus at Wilmar. She'd go to Wilmar from Pipestone by bus, but she couldn't go from here to Pipestone. And we're on a dusty road, it's hot, and the bee came. We had a bee, and all of a sudden, the bee stung Gina. Oh, she yelled like everything. And we had to stop. Now, what to do? She was a nurse. What to do? What to do? What to do? And I said, take some mud and put on. I was a nurse, but mud, still put on that, and it'll be all right. It did. But here was a nurse.
Yeah, but you had to spit on that mud before you got to spit.
Yeah, we used that many times.
Aunt Gina was not good with her loved ones when they were ill. No, she wasn't very good. Do you remember that? She just was worried and didn't really. Mother used to tell me that, and I could see that. She not when her own. I know she was a wonderful nurse, and she was very, astute at that. But when her own got sick, she wasn't real.
That could have been from the fact she lost her mother so
Could have
suddenly.
been from that,
Because that was a loved one that all of us
That
had.
went so fast,
The day that Martin Fiskness died, we were teaching something like that. Valley City, I don't know where, but anyway, Valley City. We went over to Fiskness to see Gina and to see about Martin too. And she took us into the bedroom to see Martin Fiskness. And then she said, "I'll bring you visitors." And she said, "The Vangstad Twins are here." And he looked up at us, "Storartet," he said.
whatever that means.
Big,
Store means big.
surprising.
Was that the day he died?
That's it, and he died that, we got home, and he died that evening. And the next morning,
I never really knew, but he died from
Well, he had
gangrene.
Gangrene, blood poisoning.
gangrene.
we can remember.
Yeah, I remember.
Well, I remember that, but I was never sure.
He was,
Well, yeah,
I don't know.
that's
I-
what it was.
I can't imagine why they didn't do a amputation.
Kids
Well, I don't remember, it was
it
too
was a long
bad.
time ago, but,
They must not.
but that's what I
was
always,
terrible, it
I
was
was
just
always
terrible.
under,
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
under the thought
But when
that
he
he
said
did die
Stuart,
from the gangrene.
he was happy to see us.
All right.
That's Stuart.
Well, speaking of Martin, my mother tells about how when Ralph was born, and Martin died that same month. He died about 3 weeks after Ralph was born, which, by the way, he is now 50 years old. We're going to sing happy birthday to him before this event is over. And, one day, Martin went to Annie and told her in Norwegian that today is the day I go to see my new grandchild. And so she got him in the car and she brought him over and he saw Ralph. And that, I think, is the last time that he ever went out of the house.
Is that right? He was a patient man, wasn't he? Sure.
Not exactly.
Was he?
No, I wouldn't say he was a real patient man. He was a good man.
Yeah, good man.
Well, I guess you would know him better because you're older and lived in the same house. But I remember one time Dad had that hog
Yes, he
pasture
was pretty patient.
to the west of our buildings there, where we planted those evergreen trees in there, and they had grown up with Canadian thistle.
Oh.
And there was Canadian thistle that stood in there at least 3 feet tall. And I remember he told Dad that when the day is right, in the spring, at a certain point, I'm going to come over and cut those, and they'll be gone forever. And sure enough, one day he comes shuffling down the road, and his feet, like this, and so it didn't go fast. He was, I don't know how old he was. He must have been in his mid-80s already then. And he took the scythe out there, and he cut that, whatever that is, acre and a half, the entire thing. He cut that with a scythe, and you know what? The thistles disappeared.
But was it just for a good rain?
I don't remember. I don't
Yes,
remember.
A thistle will die if you cut a thistle before a rain.
At a certain age, and he knew what it was, and I still remember that. I remember him coming on up the hill, and he went out there and he cut those thistles.
Well, it must have been the right time. But if you happen to get a good rain when the stalk is open, that'll kill a thistle.
Does somebody know the story about when Elim converted over from Norwegian into English?
No, we don't know because we were gone then. There's 19.
You had a comment.
I can only relate what my mother tells the story. But there had been a speaker that had a poker school program, and there was a speaker who was a relative of someone from the congregation, and he was a little older gentleman, and he scolded them for allowing too much use of English. And my mother was riding with Peter in the car because my dad couldn't be there that day. And the way I recall the story was that Peter had made some remark about this fellow was maybe getting a little too excited about the topic. And Grandpa Fiskness just made one statement saying, "Hun, brother Rap." Hun, he was right.
He's right.
He was end of discussion.
Well, Grandpa didn't want to learn English.
No,
But he could understand English. But he just wouldn't speak much English, But he could understand it. And Mama would always say, now we'd get kind of frisky sometimes, Philip and I. And she'd say, now he can understand. Even though he didn't speak English. He didn't want to speak English.
But we talk about Martin Fiskness cutting weeds. That's the way we always remember him. He was always cutting
with a
weeds.
side.
Yeah, but he was good with the side.
And he walked over to about that rainbow land, and you could see him come across. At one time, we didn't know about this, but it was a year after, not a year after, but a year after the incident, that Ole found a hit book, wasn't it? For the $2.50, wasn't it?
Yeah, something like that.
And Martin Fiskness had was cutting across, and he was crawling over the fence, you see, and I lost his purse. And then Ole found it. There's no name in it. But Ole said, I knew it couldn't have to be Martin's because he's the only one that walked. So he brought it. And Martin wasn't excited about it. He was awfully glad to get it back. But
Besides using the size, next thing was splitting wood.
oh, yes.
Week in and week out for hours till they got the pile so high you couldn't hardly see
David Larson
over
would
it.
say that's fun. He says that's a lot of fun.
Splitting wood.
Cut wood.
You talk about Martin and Grandpa Martin and language. I can recall when I was about 8, 9 years old, right out here in the back of Elim, he was there one day, and I had heard the older people greeting each other in Norwegian, so I thought, well, I'm going to do that to Grandpa too.
Yeah.
So I said, tuck for sist. And he just beamed. I mean, I still remember that. He just had a smile from ear to ear, and then I think he said something like sure tuck or whatever it was. I hadn't remembered that he hadn't really learned English.
And you didn't eat anything green. It
Anyway.
was all poison, he said.
Green.
No
No
green,
green
yellow,
yellow.
no green,
With the fear of screen.
with the pear skin, nothing. Mother always said that, why you can't give Grandpa, you can't have that, there's green. Nothing green.
Who were Martin and Greta's best friends?
That I don't know. Who were our best friends of our parents? Well, I don't know.
Would it have been the Forbricks?
Best friends? No, I don't know the Forbricks were.
Well, they were really
Sorties.
Oh, Sorties might have
Sorties
been.
were there.
Yeah, they were with Sorties a lot. But they were with Forbricks a lot.
Yes, but they're,
But they're relatives, I know.
oh yeah, I mean, they were not the best.
Martin and Louise were brother and sister.
Yes, they were. I thought they were good friends. That looked pretty nice.
They were good friends with Sorties.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I remember Bertha.
She was a very friendly
Yes,
person.
yes, she was, because she'd come out to the road, or she'd be out by the road, and I remember even in the first and second grade stopping and talking to her. She was an elderly woman then.
And I bet you got a cookie from
Oh, yes, yes. I think that was why I stopped. I think we got cookies, cookies and milk.
See, did you, your folks own the Brennmore land? 80 acres of that, didn't they?
Well, my dad had 40 and Peter had 40, and that all kind of got divided up when
But what
Martin
sold that land.
passed
So
away.
did you own that? at
No,
that time?
no,
Did you have,
no, Dad didn't own that, or neither did Peter or Martin.
No,
I think that when
but,
when they settled up between Carl, Peter, and Gina, Gina got money.
Yeah.
Dad and Peter each got 40 up there, and I think Dad borrowed some to buy his farm.
Peter was given all of the home products, everything that was at the home place. Just went with the farm.
Yeah. So.
Which includes, and I think maybe you and I were talking about that, Lester, the Fiskness plot has is it 6 lots, is that how it is? One plot has 6 lots?
Yeah.
And 2 of them are taken by the grandparents, 2 by Peter and Annie, 1 by Gina. So you 4 kids have an extra lot within that plot. Dad once wanted me to know that. He said, you need to know that.
You need to know that, yeah. Well, I guess that's the case.
Well, should we move along? I think we've kind of, there's probably a lot, the longer we sat and talked, the more would come to surface. How about, what do you remember of some of the early days with the Fisknesses and the Vangstads and Elim and the start? Now, you weren't here for the start, obviously, so.
She was telling me when we were in the sanctuary about what the sanctuary looked like originally, without having this bowl.
We said that this, that was added later on, but I can't remember when we were little. It was always there. Well, I think we always had this altar while we were here.
Oh, really?
But I know that it was a straight wall once.
Behind.
And then when the northwest wind came, then that wall, you see, was would go with the wind. And they could see, you could sit in church and see how it moved towards you. So then they added this old, which is a blessing in disguise because it improved.
Well, Elmer Hagen painted that, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Well, maybe it was just before that they added
It
that.
might be, and Alvin built the painting, that altar and all that.
It was before that, it was added before that.
Okay, it was added before
Yeah,
that.
it could have been before that, but probably not too long.
Must have been when we were probably 5, 6 years old, maybe.
Now, in your recollection, would there have been a livery stable out here south of
Yes.
church?
There's a barn, the
Yeah.
barn, and there was room for
Long, narrow.
Yeah, long, narrow,
16 pair of horses.
16 teams, huh?
They had number 23. That was my number. They probably started coming.
That was your family's, number 23?
But I can't remember, was it? So then, but with that, of course, that was, came back, or the barns blew down twice, didn't they? And they rebuilt the.
Oh, okay. From when?
But I remember
The
too
wall
that.
was in need of repair. But you know, I remember something about Peter Fiskness and the barns. You do too.
Yeah.
Every, noon hours, we'd go down here to the river and wade, and we were not supposed to either,
Oh,
But nobody enforced that rule. We went down there. Well, Peter fell in. Who was Peter and?
Howard Gilson.
Howard Gilson? No, Peter and somebody else. Not,
Yes.
one of the, but anyway, they went in and, what was Samson's problem? Simon. And so the preacher, who's it? Sebaratne? Whoever the school teacher was a man. And he wouldn't let us come in to study, We were in that little school in front there. And so we made Peter, and who else? Hosea.
Yeah.
They had to go sit on the barns. They wouldn't go home.
That's
So
where
they
they dried
didn't
out.
send them home. They sat on the barns to dry out. There were no girls up there. I guess we were pretty soaked too.
Well,
This river
maybe
flowed over, like here.
maybe that's where we got our,
Didn't you
when we
ever-
were in country school, staying out at noon,
Yeah.
playing in the
Got in
river.
trouble too.
Did you ever go down there?
Stays and runs in the
We
family.
never heard the bell.
There was a little regulation about not going down the river.
I think so.
Yes,
I
there
don't know
was.
where that came from.
But we always got by that by bringing back a little science. We said we were on a science hike. We'd bring back a bird nest or something that we could find.
Piece of the Mabel Hansen or what?
Yeah, we'd say,
The
well, we went
Jamaica
on a
hands,
science hike.
that's
We'd
it.
be a little
Remember
late.
we used to play down the good song?
She just falls asleep.
Joe Palmer,
Yes.
to that.
Springs down there.
That's up for a few.
That's right.
When Elim started here, how many families about were there, like when you were kids, and and how long were the services? I've heard that they started in the morning and lasted until afternoon.
Well, they sometimes did with their special meetings, I think.
Okay.
But otherwise, it wasn't that bad.
I don't think so.
Maybe Dad just thought it was.
But
They were long.
They were long.
oh, they were long.
And then did people come and eat here too then? Sometimes at noon?
We brought
And then
their
go home in
lunch,
the
didn't we?
afternoon?
So we always brought our lunches.
You brought your lunch and you're okay?
Like
For,
donuts and vodka.
for school, you mean?
Well, no, for Sunday.
For Sunday?
That was what we, for Christmas, for we had a school picnic and so on. Otherwise,
Oh, okay, not on a regular
But,
basis.
because we had mission meetings on every 4 Sundays.
Okay.
Then we had lunch at home. I mean, if it was dark, because we served the lunch.
Oh.
We went to Martin Fiskness, and the Martin Fiskness served the lunch. But at Sunday school, when we were kids, didn't we? We went, we didn't have services every Sunday. But we had
Sunday school
every
every
Sunday.
Did
And
you,
the Sunday school much longer than the.
did you have Christmas programs when you would have candles on the tree?
Yeah.
With actual live candles, fire?
Yeah, we had no fire though, that I remember. We always sat and watched. They always had people sitting watching the tree.
Dad talks about sitting with the buckets of water in case
Yes,
the tree caught fire.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember Dad doing that.
Yeah, and that tree got dry and.
Oh, yeah, a dry tree, go up like a torch.
It was terrible.
So,
You were telling me about your Christmas piece on the
oh, yeah.
steps and
Oh,
that.
I remember that when I must have been about 3 years old. And then we walked, I sat there, down there, and we went up to say ours. Again, I remember when, I know what this, but can't remember it. But anyway, I fell. And then, oh, but I was ashamed of myself. And then, Thilda, when we went, she helped me out though. Then when we got back to Mother, then Thilda said, Lena stumbled, but she said it in Norwegian. Don't run, Lena, don't run. She said it so loud. I thought everybody heard it. But you know, it did, when I fell, everybody in the church laughed, you see. Oh, they laughed. I must have.
That's awful, isn't it?
You were out of place. And when I said, got up there, said, priest said, praise the Lord, he's good. I told him that. Even though he let me stumble.
Could you tell us a little bit about some of the early pastors of Elim that you remember? You mentioned Butner and...
We're too young to evaluate anyone, I think. Butner he's got a nice fellow. He spoke Norwegian, and he spoke Stavanger, and that was hard for us Värdarings to understand. Who was this? Butner.
No, he was a Lutheran Free Church.
No,
He was brethren?
He was the first Lutheran brethren that we
Okay.
had. Up to that time, we had.
Well, the Free Lutheran Church had been pretty good before that time, and but they came.
They were our Free
Started
Lutheran,
it.
our church pastors before that, until 1912. That's when the Lutheran brethren moved in.
What
Up to that time, we had Free Church, and that included the Martin Fiskness and the Gilbert Olsons and the Nelson, Peter, Eric Nelsons, and Uncle Larsons, and John Homley, and all those people. South, especially south of the river, or south of the church here. I don't know about the north one, because they know them too well.
Okay.
I was going to say, what pastor baptized you?
And Berlin,
Broen, yes.
Yeah.
Because Gina was baptized by Broen,
yeah.
and Dad was baptized by Broen, and I kind of figured that Gina must have been one of the first that he baptized, and Dad must have been one of the last.
And that was before Lutheran Brethren days.
Yeah.
And he wasn't good Lutheran Brethren either at that time.
No, not at that time, but then he went and founded the school. He went from Elim to Wahpeton and founded the Lutheran Brethren School.
He didn't found that though, did he? Wasn't that Lundeberg that did that?
Well, Lundeberg was kind of the first president.
Broen joined them at a little bit later.
Yeah, Broen joined him in a little bit, but he was...
Bruin joined him later.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it was Lundeberg that was spearhead.
And then I understand that John Clicken was a member of that first... They held the Bible school here one winter, kind of a prototype,
Yeah.
just to see how it would go, and John Clicken was a member of that class.
He must have been about 14, 15, 16.
Yeah, about 1903, I think, before that was done. I remember reading about it, but
Oh, yeah.
I remember forget the dates.
That'd be John, which John Cooper?
John Clicken.
Sealer. Mary Helga. Would he be old
Yeah.
enough?
Yeah, well, it'd be your brother-in-law.
What's this, would he be old enough and, would he be old
Well,
enough
let's
at
see,
that
when was
time
he-
to
Come
even-
quickly, because didn't they come in 1906? Didn't they move here in 1906?
The Clickens? Weren't they here at the beginning?
They were here at the beginning.
I don't know.
They're young. They are.
Yeah.